Today I ducked up by destroying the entirety of my family for only $99. Throwaway account. We've all been seeing the recent craze of DNA testing and whatnot, so my dad and I decided to jump in the bandwagon, and we bought 2 from 23andMe. We got our results back a few days ago, and I went into the DNA relatives section to check out my matches. At the top it listed my dad as only sharing 29.2% DNA with me and being predicted to be a half brother, which is impossible. This didn't make sense to me, since we also shared a paternal haplogroup, and we just look so alike, so he was definitely my father. My cousin also had taken the test a while back, and she shared 24.6% with me, also predicted to be my half sibling. We are supposed to share around 12%, being first cousins. I couldn't think of a genetic relationship that would explain what I was seeing, and I had doubts in the accuracy of the percentages, so I made this post on r/23andMe, asking for help. Basically, the shared percentages are extremely accurate and highly unlikely to be false. The only realistic explanation for what I was seeing was that my uncle, my cousin's father and my dad's brother, is my father. Reality hit me in the face like a flying bag of bricks. All the dots lined up, and I felt a sense of loss. I sat in my room for an hour just in shock, and then I had a feeling of anger come over me. I needed some ducking answers. Without even thinking, I rushed out of my room and confronted my mother downstairs. My mom is a businesswoman and is often away on business trips. She had no idea my dad and I had done one of these tests since she was away on a trip and just got back. My mother and I never had a traditional relationship. She was always focused on her work and my dad ended up mostly raising me. My irrational self didn't even sugarcoat it. I asked her if she cheated on dad with Uncle David, name changed for obvious reasons. I have never seen the color drain from someone's face so quickly. She looked dumbfounded and then mumbled, "What kind of question is this?" Of course not. I told her everything. The test, percentages, DNA matches, all of it. Hit the fan. My mom fell to the ground crying, begging me not to tell dad. I left her there and went back into my room. I called my cousin, now half sibling, and told her everything. She ended the call screaming, "Dad, now uncle," then came home and stumbled into my room asking what's wrong with mom. I told him everything too. He didn't say anything after calming down. He left the room and I locked the door. For the next few hours, I heard my entire family fall apart outside my door. My parents got into a heated argument and my grandparents rushed over to see what was going on. My aunt-in-law and David showed up shortly later, and I'm pretty sure I heard my dad and David get into some physical fight. Utter chaos. I feel like a mess. I know it's not my fault, but I can't help feeling that this is all because of me. If I had spent my ducking birthday money on something else, none of this would have happened, but another part of me is glad to know the truth. I'm too scared to go outside. I don't even know what the outcome was. The only noise I hear in the house now is the occasional sobbing coming from my mother, and I sure my dad is out of the house. Screw my life. TLDR, mom and uncle, both having spouses of their own, ducked, made me, and proceed to not tell anyone. I take a DNA test 19 years later and it all comes crashing down. I've locked myself in my room, and I'm pretty sure my family has ceased to exist outside. Today I messed up update by destroying the entirety of my family for only $99. Thanks for the support guys. Means a lot. Back to where we were. I eventually left my room, called my dad, and he was actually at the hospital with my grandmother. She couldn't handle the situation and had a heart attack right when she went home. I knew my mother was still in the house, but I left her there, again, without saying a word, and went to the hospital. I got to the hospital, saw my grandmother, she's in stable condition, and then sat down with my dad to talk. First thing we told each other was that this situation didn't change our relationship. He was still my father, and I was still his son. I got the confirmation of my dad and David getting into some altercation. Dad told me he ducked him up really hard. My mother had told my dad that she was drunk and David raped her. The only reason she had not told anyone was out of fear of destroying my father's family. Dad then suggested going to the police. She refused and then started to slightly change her story, making my dad doubt her claim. That's when David and everyone else came over. David claimed my mother was lying to save her and that they had consensual sex. As of now, my dad and I have no idea who to believe. He says his relationships with my mother and David had always been good. He's not sure what to do. David's wife is filing for divorce since this occurred after they were married. My cousin is holding up alright, although she's still pretty shaken up. My dad and I have been staying with my grandparents for the past week until we figure out what to do. Any advice would help. Thank you. Sorry if this sounds rushed. I typed this on my way to class. TLDR, grandma had heart attack. Mom claimed David raped her. David denies that. Cousin's mother is filing for divorce. Dad and I are staying with my grandparents for now. Today I ducked by getting a DNA test and revealing a family secret. I've always been interested in doing one of those at-home kits that tell you your ethnicity estimates. My mother has, for many years, claimed that her own great-grandmother was completely Native American, and I recently learned that this is apparently something common for Southerners to claim, but that it is rarely true. I finally went ahead and bought one of the kits because there is nothing I enjoy more in life than proving my mother wrong. Fast forward a few weeks. I get my results. I'm 0% Native America, which isn't exactly shocking. The real surprise comes from the fact that I'm also 0% Eastern European. This probably wouldn't mean much for most people, but I happen to be Polish. Or at least, I thought I was. I have an unpronounceable, very Polish last name. My great-grandparents were Polish-speaking immigrants. My paternal grandfather himself spoke Polish as a child. My first thought was that the test was a mistake. My results came over a week before the projected arrival date, and I knew I should be somewhere around 25% Polish/Eastern European. So maybe there had been an error somewhere at the lab. I started digging around through my DNA relative matches. I had matched with an extended cousin with my mom's maiden name, living in the state that she grew up in. So the DNA analyzed was definitely mine, and this was not a switched tube situation. There were only two possible explanations. Either my own dad was not my biological father, or my Polish grandfather was not the biological father of my dad. I look a lot like my father, so it seemed unlikely that we were not related. However, there was no strong family resemblance between my dad and his own father. In fact, my grandfather and many of his siblings had a, we'll call it, striking nose at my sister, and I had often rejoiced in not inheriting. Also, my paternal grandparents had a disastrous marriage and bitter divorce, and affair did not seem out of the question. My paternal grandfather died over 10 years ago, but my paternal grandmother is still living, and I gave her a call. It took a while for me to fully explain the DNA testing to her. She's 87, but we got there. She denied it and tried to explain the unexpected results with a long ramble about migrating European tribes before I was finally able to make her understand that I would be able to test relatives from the Polish side of the family and determine whether or not I was actually related to them. She told me that she didn't think that was a good idea and I should think about it before contacting anyone. I think I knew right then, but it was not until today, 2 days later, that she finally admitted it to my sister. My father had been lied to his entire life about his biological father. So who is my actual paternal grandfather? TBD. My grandmother promised my sister that she will tell the two of everything when my sister gets into town for Christmas. She requested that we not tell anyone until then. It's too late. My sister already told everyone. TLDR, did an ethnicity test. Found out my father was apparently the product of an extramarital affair and never knew. Today I messed up update, and the grandfather is. In my previous post, I said that my grandmother promised to tell all when my sister comes to town next week. Officially, that is still the plan, but my sister, who apparently missed her calling as a special prosecutor, got my grandmother to admit to her over the phone the story of what actually happened. And it is interesting. Without going too much into my family history, when I first noticed the inconsistencies in my DNA test, I had an early idea who might be my bio-paternal grandfather. Basically, my grandmother had a long-time family friend that she had known even before my grandfather PG. To try and distinguish between the two men, I'm going to refer to them as PG for Polish grandpa and BG for bio grandpa. She and this friend maintained contact for years and years, all the way until both of their second spouses had died, and they married each other. Their kids had grown up together, even before they become step-siblings as adults, and they are still part of my extended family as aunts and uncles, even though BG died when I was a baby, almost 30 years ago. Over the years, there has been a bit of mild speculation that BG had possibly fathered my dad's younger brother. No one really took it all that seriously, but he did look an awful lot like one of BG's and his wife's kids. Because of this, the day I got my test results and figured out what they probably meant, I called my sister and we ordered a test for her best friend, one of BG's grandchildren. Telling this information to grandma was what finally made her admit it. I was going to be matched as a cousin with my sister's best friend, who, although considered a part of my extended family, should have been of no biological relation to me. But here's where it gets a little confusing. My grandmother claims that PG was sterile as the result of something that happened to him in World War II. She says all 3 of her children are biologically from PG, but that it was all done intentionally through artificial insemination. She desperately wants this to be kept a secret from everyone, including my dad and his siblings, because she is worried that people will assume the worst about her. My dad and his siblings were born in the early 1950s. Does anyone know what the odds of this were? How common was artificial insemination back then? Would someone have really used a friend as a donor? More than 3 separate times my grandmother had at least one miscarriage that I remember her telling me about at some point. My grandmother has a known history of rewriting events in her favor. I guess it really does not matter at this point why BG was the father, but it is frustrating to feel like she might just be throwing in more lies on top of everything. TLDR, grandmother claims my biological grandfather was a family friend that she and her husband used as a sperm donor through artificial insemination. Answers to common questions from my last post. A lot of people wanted to know which DNA test I used. I used MyHeritage, but I have no idea if it is better than any of the others. I picked it because it was cheapest. A lot of people also wanted to tell me that these tests are not very accurate. I don't really know what to say about that, except that it was accurate enough to know that I did not have any Polish ancestry. Some people wanted to know how my dad was taking all of this. He has not yet been told who his bio father was, but he did not have a particularly strong reaction to the original information. His opinion was that it did not particularly matter to him, because whoever it was dead anyone. My dad is not one to dwell on this type of thing. My mother thinks my sister and I are being ridiculous for obsessing over the whole thing, but this is the same mother that still refuses to admit that she does not have any recent Native American ancestry, so. I, 19 male, recently found out that my older sister, 34 female, is actually my biological mother. Throwaway account because I don't want this linked to my main account. My older sister, let's call her Rose, and I have a great relationship. Since I was a baby we were raised with an amazing adoptive family, and she has always taken care of me. I grew up in a very warm and loving environment, but from what I was told I was lucky. I was told the story of how me and my sister had 2 drug addict parents who never took care of us. They never bothered feeding us, and used to left us at a junkie friend's house for days to go out partying. When my mom was pregnant with me, she smoked and got drunk. Luckily I turned out pretty fine, pretty often, and when I was born my sister was the only one who took care of me. When I was 2 months old they left us both in a mall and left. We got help from an old couple, who also turned into our adoptive family, and we contacted the police, but my parents weren't at the house, which looked like a homeless cave. We never saw them again, and after several months in foster care the couple that helped us throughout the whole way BTW agreed to adopt us. Today I'm 19 and Rose is 34. I still live with my adoptive family, and she lives about 20 minutes away, so I come and visit her at least 3 to 4 times a week. So a couple of months ago my friend offered me to take a DNA test to find some information about my heritage, since my sister wouldn't speak of them much. After the results came in I found out some pretty interesting things, like being 50% Ashkenazi Jew. I found out later that I had an aunt, 33F, in the system. I immediately reached out to her, let's call her Janet, and we agreed to meet in person. All that without telling Rose a thing. When we met up I could see we had some similar characteristics like same hair color and same eyes. We tried to figure things out, so I asked her if she has a brother or sister, and she told me that when she was 13 her 14-year-old sister got pregnant while being drunk with her junkie boyfriend, and a month after giving birth she ran away with the baby after some pretty intensive fights with their parents. They never found her and stopped looking after 1.5 years. I connected the dots, asked to see a picture of her, so we went to her parents' house. Mom wasn't home, and father died 3 years ago. When I saw the picture, I knew this was Rose, 100%. Rose is my mom. We were never abandoned. We didn't have junkie parents, and she fabricated the entire thing to me and our adoptive family. I immediately gave Janet a hug and told her that it's too much for me right now and asked her to keep it a secret for now. I went to my best friend's house, told him everything, and for a week now I'm sleeping over at his place. I told my parents and my sister I'm at his house because he bought a new game that we both wanted for long, and avoided talking to Rose much. I can't look her in the eyes right now, let alone tell her I know the truth. Edit. My best friend just took me out for a movie and a drink. I'm not that drunk right now though. I thank you all so much for your warm replies, made me look at the situation a bit clearer. I have decided to break it to Rose this week, but I need some time to think about how to tell her I know. I don't know if I should try getting there slowly or just break the news to her somehow. I even considered bringing her sister with me, but I genuinely think she will be annoyed. I'll keep updating as soon as I'll decide how to tell her. Right now going to bed to sleep it over. Edit 2. After seeing some comments asking how the adoption process went, I decided I need to explain some things. First of all, it's worth mentioning that the adoption process wasn't immediate, and it took about a year between the time that happy couple found us outside the mall and the time they adopted us. We were in foster care that time, and Rose used to keep touch with them, and they would come visit us once or twice a week, or so I'm told. I don't know what to believe now. Eventually Rose broke down in tears for them and told them she hates foster care and that her little brother, me, would grow up here, and she couldn't bear that thought. At that time they decided to try and adopt her and hired lawyers and stuff, and after a few months it was legal and done. At least that's what I was told. I don't think my adoptive parents knew, but if they did then that story is probably a lie too. Update. I, 19 male, recently found out that my older sister, 34 female, is actually my biological mother. Okay, so I first of all want to thank everyone for your honest replies. It really helped me to get my feelings straight and get ready to confront her. So after a week of avoiding, I came to her house with a picnic basket by surprise, so I'll have a chance to speak with her. She was happy to see me, and I told her to sit down because we need to talk. I started things with saying that I know that she has a secret that she's been hiding from me for years. Her face turned red and she started crying like hell. She knew what I was talking about. I told her the story about the DNA test, about Janet, and basically what I told you guys in the last post. Well, after she calmed down a bit she told me the truth. She told me how she got drunk at a party and slept with one of the jerks who does nothing but weed every day. He didn't really care about a future kid and was like, yeah, whatever s. Apparently she found out that 10 years ago he was stabbed in prison after sitting for drug dealing, assault and armed robbery. She told me how her mother used to convince her father to talk me out of the idea of keeping the baby. They would constantly fight with her. When the baby was born they told her on the spot that she brought shame upon the family and they will not help raising the baby in any way, meaning she will have to work meanwhile to have money for her baby and sometimes for herself. After a couple of months of loaning from her friends and juggling between working and taking care of me, she had a huge fight with her parents and told them that if they are not helping financially and barely in any sort of way, she and me are better off without them. As they sent her to her room she escaped in the middle of the night, hitchhiked to a neighboring country, and by morning she was there already. She tried to take care of me for a few days. She found an old abandoned house that used to have homeless people coming around every now and then, and she took me to the mall. When I started crying, she started crying too. The couple that adopted us immediately came to our aid and asked if we lost our mother. Rose jumped on the opportunity and came up with a story and an alias. Police figured out we are not in the system for multiple reasons. We were raised in foster care for a year and a half until the couple that helped us decided to make the effort and adopt us, so we won't be separated. It took them a few months and a couple of lawyers, but they managed to adopt us both. Rose knew all along that her parents are looking for her. They came to their senses after a day or so. She reached out to them and told them in a letter that she is fine and is taking care of herself and me. She is not homeless and found a nice couple to help her with the baby. She made it clear for them that she is never coming back and they should stop looking, and a month after that they stopped. A few years later her father went on a quest to find her. She was after 18, secretly. After so much time searching he found her and apologized, and after a while she forgave him and kept secretly in touch with him. He met me a few times and I knew him as one of Rose's old friends from the park. He helped us a few times and apparently they would meet up once every 2 months secretly. Ironically, I'm glad I got to know him before he passed, even if I didn't know who he really is. By the way, the adoptive family never found out about the whole thing. So after hearing this, I told her we missed a lot by not knowing she is my mother, and I told her I understand she did the right thing. I pulled out an "It's a Boy" sign from the picnic basket and some snacks for a late baby shower, and we hugged for an hour or so, had a lot of fun, watched a movie, and I headed off to my parents' adoptive house to have dinner with them. I'm glad she is my mother. I feel for the first time in years, complete. I don't care she lied, because she did it for the greater good, and I honestly can't imagine my life right now if she didn't. Thanks Reddit for helping me getting my feelings straight, and helping me out mentally, to cope with everything that happened.